Welcome to the Education Scotland podcast. In every episode, we are joined by teachers, professionals and experts to unpack some of the big questions and topics facing the education sector in Scotland. Stay informed with the latest on education in Scotland by subscribing to our podcast.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this Education in Scotland podcast. My name is Ollie Bray, and I'm one of the strategic directors at Education in Scotland, and I am absolutely delighted to once again welcome you to this mini-series that we've been having on the curriculum improvement cycle, where we've been exploring different cross-curricular themes. And for those of you that have been sort of following this series so far during the summer term of 2025, we've already explored and had some great conversations around financial literacy or financial education, learning for sustainability, creativity, and digital literacy and digital skills. And I'm absolutely delighted today that that we're going to be getting into a conversation with a good friend and colleague, Dr. Lynne Robertson, who is our Senior Education Officer for Social Studies. And I probably should say at this point that Lynne and I have known ourselves for a very, very long time because many moons ago we were actually geography teachers, weren't we, Lynne? You know, around that.
We were indeed.
And Lynne is leading the work, that we're doing on the curriculum improvement cycle around social studies, but in particular as well, and this is relevant for this podcast, Lynne has been leading the work that we've been doing around the cross-curricular theme of political literacy. So welcome, Lynne.
Thank you. Thanks, Ollie. It's really good to be able to discuss this work, which has been going now for quite a while.
Well, it has, hasn't it? And I kind of just want to maybe sort of start there around that, or maybe actually I'll come to that as my second question, because because probably the thing that we should maybe sort of discuss first is that political literacy as a term, it means many different things to different people, doesn't it? And so I just wondered, I suppose, for the benefit of the listeners, could you in your view, and for the work that's been emerging, what do we actually mean by political literacy, and in the context of this conversation that we'll have over the next 20 minutes?
I think for me, political literacy is what helps young people to engage in a democratic society. And it's really important for our young people that they can do that in an informed and reasoned way. And political literacy, I think, gives them the tools to engage critically with sources of information that they come across and come to conclusions about reliability. It's really important that they can understand too where power lies in our society, because it can help them to challenge and change things for the better. So I think political literacy's got a real strength in terms of enabling our young people to become responsible citizens in our society.
I mean, I just think what you said there is, it's just so important, because that definition that you've given, it just allows us to go deep, like in some of those democratic, issues. Like I sometimes get worried when we have conversations about political literacy out in the schools that people kind of like box it into just voting, and that's not to say that voting's not important, and thinking about balance is not important, but of course it's so much more important than that. And I'm so pleased that you mentioned that disinformation bit. I'm sure that we'll kind of get onto that, in a second. So I suppose just prompting to a comment that you've already made is that this work has been going on for a while as part of the curriculum improvement cycle. We've been working on these cross-curricular themes for about a year now, but the work on political literacy started before then, when we started to kind of explore that. And of course, the work on political literacy in the curriculum has always been part of CFE. I mean, I remember a briefing paper from many years ago, for example. So again, I just be great if you could maybe just go through a bit of a potted history, if that would be okay.
Absolutely. So when Curriculum for Excellence came out, what seems like quite a few years ago now, political literacy was very much part of Curriculum for Excellence. And it was, at that point, a responsibility of all. And we produced quite a bit of support around political literacy, because it was a term that was a worry for teachers, I think, and it's that word political, which is really a concern for people when they look around this area of work. So we tried to encourage teachers that this was not necessarily about political parties and about bringing, politicians into schools. This was about particularly enabling young people who perhaps didn't take modern studies, which is a wonderful and unique subject we have in Scotland, but who didn't take modern studies, to be able to be involved in their society in a variety of different ways, not just in voting. But it would be worth saying that the terms mis and disinformation were really not, I don't even know if they were things when CFE first came in. I was thinking about this morning when I was preparing for the podcast. So I'm not sure they were even things back then. But what we did look at was how you could use political literacy as a context right across the curriculum. And that's something that is very much a feature of the work that we're doing today. So we produced a briefing paper, I think it's 13, unlucky for some, and we did some work around how schools could, from pupil councils to young people being involved in a variety of different citizenship activities as well, which involve political literacy. So it's been there in the background, but I think our current society makes it even more important that we're looking at political literacy today.
I mean, I think that last point there is just well, everything you said in that last remark. I think it's just so important. But that last point is particularly pertinent, as in with what's going on in the world. At the moment that young people need the skills, to be able to sort of navigate, something which to me certainly feels very, very fragile, at the moment. And it's an interesting point that you were making about disinformation and how our views have sort of changed on that, over time. And I think that we've always tried to encourage children and young people to be able to critically examine different sources. Yeah. But it seems to me that young people now are exposed to so much information. It's the balance is almost tipped to trying to find out what's true compared to what's not true, which was almost the kind of the rhetoric, sort of 10 years ago when we were looking at it. Yep. It's just an interesting thing, I sort of suppose, to explore. Tell us a little bit about then. Tell us a little bit about the kind of the group that you've set up, like initially, to kind of explore this bit of work. And I suppose for the folks that are listening, that they'll know that we've tried to use the same sort of format for each of the different groups around that. But I think it's probably just worth saying that because we were already looking at political literacy before we started this work on sort of cross-cutting themes, is that we used your work as a bit of a pilot to sort of test some of the ideas. So maybe you could just sort of share some of the makeup of the groups and how that work and kind of what that's looked like, and particularly in the last sort of 18 months or so.
Absolutely. We have been incredibly fortunate to have a large number of passionate teachers involved in this work, and not just modern studies teachers who have a vested interest, but we've had teachers from a variety of sectors and also different curriculum areas who want to see political literacy have a stronger presence. We're very keen that the majority of people in the room were teachers, and obviously that's a big ask. We know that's a big ask. Ollie, you and I both know how hard it is to leave a full day of cover. Yep. And then to come back and pick up the pieces afterwards as well. So we are really appreciative of the number of teachers who've gotten involved in the work. And we're sitting about a 3-to-1 ratio deliberately. So 3 teachers to 1 stakeholder in the room. And we have also been very fortunate to have Glasgow University, Edinburgh University, University of West of Scotland, University of Stirling. Right. So we've got some really strong stakeholders from there, but we've also got the Electoral Commission, the Scottish Parliament Education Centre. So bringing people together who have an interest in this area has been really important. And one of the things that the teachers who've been involved have really appreciated is having the opportunity to speak to, for example, Hugh Davis from Edinburgh University, who has real expertise in the area of mis and disinformation, yep. Callum McGregor. These people are bringing their up-to-date, brand new research into this field and enabling teachers to work with that and start to see where the big ideas of political literacy lie.
That's great. That's great. And again, you know, it's because of the kind of the pioneering work really that you kind of led on, that we developed this sort of like wider model around making sure that making sure that we've got a high practitioner focus in the room. That's very, very important. We're committed to that during the whole curriculum improvement cycle, but also making sure that we've got that great balance of academics and stakeholders, you know, as part of it. I'm interested in sort of some of the conversations that you've been having about this, because and we touched on this in some of the other things, is that when you get a bunch of passionate people in the room, which we're full of this, we've been overwhelmed by the enthusiasm, but sometimes passionate people, just through the nature of their passions, disagree and, you know, rub up against each other, you know a little bit around that. And I'm just interested to sort of find out, I suppose, is there anything that's kind of like surprised you about the sort of the conversations, you know, as you sort of progress with the work, and anything that's even perhaps changed your own views on it, or the views on the group as you've sort of progressed through the last 12 months or so?
Absolutely. We, I think, have reformulated. We did develop we created a collaboration group first, but from that a smaller core group who went away and did some work on the big ideas. And I think those big ideas have had many iterations, because you know, people got right down to know that word can't go in. Not happy with that word, and we've also had some discussions around whether we actually like the title political literacy or not. Which, you know, in itself is one that is a bit divisive, and so, you know, we're looking at a variety of different ideas around perhaps democratic engagement, or, you know, there's a number of possible topics, but we've come down to 4 big ideas, and I think I was surprised that there was 4, because coming from obviously a geography, but also I was a modern studies teacher too. For me, democratic values and ideology and rights, absolutely. But it was so interesting that we were looking at the roots of power, and also at mis and disinformation. But you asked me the thing that surprised me most, and I have to be honest, it was when we went out to consult young people in December last year, and as part of an early consultation with them. And as what we did, one of the tasks we did was we asked them, can you rank these information sources from most to least reliable? And it was very low tech. It was little squares of paper, put them in a line. Without fail, every group rated books as either the least reliable or the second least reliable.
Wow.
And for me, coming from a certain vintage, I was shocked. I have to admit, absolutely shocked, because we then started to drill down, and obviously I was out with George Milliken from the technologies team. We both did university degrees. We both spent a lot of time looking at books. I spent a lot of time in the school library when I was a kid, because that was where you learned about the world. But it was so interesting, because their reasoning was, as soon as books are published, they're out of date.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I guess we shouldn't be surprised, because we have a generation of young people who have information. They're used to having information literally at their fingertips.
Yeah.
So it was fascinating, absolutely, and really surprising.
I mean, that is fascinating, and I've not heard you tell that sort of particular story before. So I find that really, really interesting. You know, as well, like in terms of how that works. And it's interesting that you're saying. So again, we've touched on this sort of during the other podcast, and in fact, the last person that we were speaking to was George, who you've just sort of referenced there, who was out with you with the children, young people, and you talked about the term digital literacy in there, because again that came back sort of quite strongly, like in the testing as well, is that kids don't mind the word literacy, but they prefer that in the context of Gaelic and English. Really, they're not as keen on political literacy, digital literacy, financial literacy. You know, around, they just kind of find that confusing. You know, around that, and there's some really interesting questions there about whose language is it. You know, around that, and ultimately, if we're going to have a child-centered curriculum, which is what we're inspiring to do, we need to use the language of young people. This is brilliant. It's a fascinating conversation. I suppose that, so I've got a couple of things, or maybe just to sort of finish up with, because we did sort of promise that we would sort of stay to around sort of like 20-25 minutes, for this, and we could speak about it all day. So I'm interested in a couple of things, really, and we can maybe sort of just lump these two questions together if you're okay with it. So I'm interested in what's been the most difficult part of the process so far, around that, and then I'm also interested around what's the most like important question that we should be asking, I guess, sort of during this work, and feel free to answer them separately or pull them together. I don't mind.
Thanks, Ollie. I think the most difficult part of this process is genuine co-creation, because I think that we need to have teachers involved in this process. You and I were both teachers, but it's certainly 10 years since I've taught in the classroom. And I think it's incredibly important that we have people whose day-to-day job is teaching our children and young people, and getting that really wide range of views, primary, ASN, early years. It's really important that we have a curriculum for all of our young people. I said this at my collaboration event for social studies a couple of weeks ago. I'm really keen that we're not creating a white middle-class central belt able-bodied curriculum. This has to be a curriculum for all of our young people, children, young people in Scotland. So that genuine co-creation, and that takes a lot of time and effort to get that right and make sure everyone's represented. And I suppose related to that, you asked me what is the most important question. I think the most important question is, why are we doing this? We have to keep that in the forefront of our minds. And I know at Education Scotland, we're going through all these processes, trying to make sure we get all of this right. And sometimes you get so caught up in the process that you have to stop sometimes and remind yourself, actually, why are we doing this? We're doing this because the world has changed more than I think any of us would have thought since CFE was implemented. And we have a generation of young people who have, my generation in the 1970s, when I was at primary school, the prospect of touching my watch and saying, hey Siri, tell me, about the President of America, would just have been science fiction. So it's really important that we are making sure that regardless of how the society changes, our young people are ready for it and can make absolutely the best of it and contribute the most to the society that they're in.
I mean, that's such a great answer, Lynn. Around that. I mean, and I do. I've got personal anxiety around future-proofing the curriculum. Around that, I just don't think we've necessarily been good at that, like in the past. Around that, and really sort of taking on board these quite important technological changes. Around that, and again. To use your example there, if you go back to when you and I were at school to now, society has changed, around that. I mean, I can't even imagine, what it will be like in sort of 10 years' time, around that. So what are the building blocks that we need for children, young people to be able to survive and thrive in that? And the other bit there, I just kind of want to re-emphasize if that's okay. So, because we referenced modern studies teachers a couple of times during our conversation, but I suppose it's just really, really important that people know that as part of these groups we've been bringing together, there's been a combination of not just secondary teachers, as part of that, but also primary, ELC, special schools. We've had Gaelic medium in the room. We've tried to bring together, in essence, I suppose, a mini Scotland, to actually kind of contribute to these, to these conversations. So last couple of questions, if that's okay, Lynn. So my sort of almost summing up question would be, I suppose, before asking sort of closing remarks, is what's next? Where's this work going next? I suppose between now, in the summer or now until the start of next academic year, what can people kind of expect to see, or the sort of the direction of travel with this particular piece of work?
Well, we've got our big ideas. We had done some refining down, but we've done a little refining back up again because people were unhappy, and it was clear why they were unhappy, to be honest. So we've done a bit of work on that. But now I think with the curriculum cycle as well, with the curriculum areas all going through their improvement cycle, it's where we start to look at those contexts for political literacy fitting in across the curriculum, because implementation is something we have to get right. For those of us who came through CFE, we know what, and higher still, I have to say, I had that discussion with someone yesterday. we felt higher still was really well implemented.
Yeah.
If you look at CFE and compare the two, so the implementation process is really important. So we have to get this right so that we don't end up saying political literacy is for everyone and it ends up being for no one.
Yeah.
So we need to now start looking at that process of implementation.
There's one wonderful quote, and it wasn't in the context of political literacy. It was in another area which could probably be deemed as an entitlement at the moment to CFE. And it was chatting to Joe Smith, who from Stirling University, who's part of one of the groups I know doing the work on sort of social subjects, and he described it. And you could insert political literacy or learning sustainability or digital in here around it's everywhere but nowhere. So actually, how is it going to make? How is it actually going to make a difference to children and young people? Lynne, we're nearly at the end, but I want to squeeze in one last question, if that's okay. And it's been a brilliant conversation, and the people that are watching this won't realise sort of quite how early it is in the morning for this. So it's been a really sort of uplifting sort of start to the day. But this is a question I've been asking everybody so far. So in terms of the work that you're doing, what do you think it'll actually mean for Scotland's children and young people if we get this right?
I think it will mean that we are bringing a generation of children and young people into a society that they can change for the better. Mm-hmm. I've always felt that social studies, political literacy, if they do nothing else, they make young people say, "Oh, I don't like that. How do I change that? Oh, I know how to change that." Because, there are lots of things in our society and in our wider world that young people will have a view on. And if they can use sources, come to a reasoned conclusion, and then are enabled to take action, gosh, that's a group of young people I'd be very glad to have as leading our world when I'm in my dotage, watching them on my iPad or whatever it is by that point.
Lynne, brilliant. Lynne, that's been a fascinating conversation around that, and just a big thank you to you and and the wider team for everything that you're doing in this space. It's just such an important topic, and again, such an important topic when we consider everything that's kind of going on in the world at the moment, which, as I've already sort of highlighted, and just feel just a little bit fragile at the moment. And I suppose just for the folks that are listening, I really hope that you've enjoyed this. Don't forget that you can subscribe to Educating Scotland podcast so you can get all of the updates. And if this is the first kind of mini podcast that you've listened to about the curriculum improvement cycle, please remember that we've recorded kind of 4 before this, and we've got another 3 to go, which we'll be recording before June 2025. Lynne, thanks very much. Have a great day.
Thanks, Ollie.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Don't forget to subscribe for notification of when a new episode is published. If there is a topic you would like to hear featured on this podcast, get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. Follow us on our social media channels for all the latest news from Education Scotland. Education Scotland is a Scottish Government executive agency charged with supporting quality and improvement in Scottish education.